Tonight we are in Joel chapter 1, verses 2 through 13. Last week we looked at verse 1, and that was just enough. I still blame Keith for slowing us down, and I'm saying that for his benefit, as he said he's going to watch this later on. So, Keith, you're missed, and we'll make it through tonight more. So, all right, let's read verse 2 and 3. We'll look at that, and then we'll read the remainder after that. Joel says, "Hear this, O elders, and listen, all inhabitants of the land. Has anything like this happened in your days or in your fathers' days? Tell your sons about it, and let your sons tell their sons, and their sons the next generation." All right, as we pause there, man, hopefully we can tell people are saying stuff about me already. I don't enjoy that. They go, okay, this is going to be our text for tonight. No, I only have half a page here. So, as we can tell, that whatever is happening, what has happened to these people, it's significant. It so much so that there's this, your sons and their sons, not only tell it to them, but there's an aspect that this is such a devastation with such catastrophic effects that you would almost not even have to tell your children because they're going to know about it. It's to a certain degree like our 9/11 and the effects that we still feel from it. It's interesting that here we are, a couple decades removed, and man, it still lingers. And this is something that's happening to them at this time. Now, first, focus on this word "here." Here. It's Shema in Hebrew, which is normally, when we think of Shema, we think of Deuteronomy 6. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one," right? But this word is here. It's just to hear and pay attention, to give heed, to listen with the intent of obeying what is being said. To not just let it sink in your ear and then float out the other one. But the purpose of, no, I'm going to be focused on what's being said, and I'm going to act or respond appropriately. Okay, so they're going to hear, to understand, to obey. And here Joel calls the people to attention because the land had experienced an unprecedented disaster that would, again, it would be the topic of conversation for generations to come. Joel is concerned that everyone sees the disaster as he does, which means that he would not have sympathy with an optimistic philosophy. Sometimes when certain things happen, devastating things, horrible things, some people want to try to kind of lift up the rug and sweep it under there. Well, it's not really that serious. Well, it's not really that bad. Well, no, Joel wants to emphasize it is that bad. It's even worse than you think. So again, instead of sliding the problem, he accepted in full horror and calls the various groupings that we're going to see tonight to mourn with him, to act and respond as he calls them to. Now, the first group of people within the land that he calls upon to hear are the elders. These are the people that would have been the leaders, spiritual leaders, representatives of the people at large. So here he's calling them, okay, you guys need to hear this, and because of your position, take this information out to those you represent, those who you oversee, those who you shepherd into some capacity. Now, we've not read verse 4, but I want to say this from the get-go. What is the great tragedy that has happened? What devastation has plagued them? It is this wave of locusts that have swept through the land, stripping it of all its vegetation. There's one. Yep. There you go. That's our mascot tonight. So, as we think about this devastation of vegetation, there's a sense that we can relate slightly this year because of the drought we've been in. We've experienced effects because of that. I know I'll probably share something down the road, but we've lost our first sheep that we've ever lost because of the condition of the grass. And I'll say more on that. But again, it just affects everything. It affects a lot, especially as you're looking at this time of this time in history, when here was a land and they didn't have a reservoir of resources that came in and said, okay, here's food for you. Here's food for your family. Here's food for your livestock. Everything's going to be okay. There's not going to... No, this is troubling to the very core. Okay? So let's now read Joel 1, verse 4. What the gnawing locust has left, what the swarming locust has eaten, and what the swarming locust has left... Oh, the creeping locust has eaten, and what the creeping locust has left, the stripping locust has eaten. Okay? So notice here, there's going to be 4 different Hebrew terms for locusts used in this verse. 4 different ones, right? The gnawing locust, the swarming locust, the creeping locust, and the stripping locust. And again, this is a very vivid picture of everything that was green, everything that was growing is now dead and gone. Yes.
My Bible says cankerworm
Yes.
and palmer worm. I looked up palmer worm and you feed off all your fruit trees.
Yeah, and there's different translations of how they are come across, and there's different, and this is kind of getting in the head, but that's okay. We're almost right here. Different interpretations regarding, I'll just say that now. Different interpretations regarding, are these different kinds of locusts? Meaning, okay, it's this type of bug and that type of bug, or is it picturing the different stages of a locust's life? And it doesn't really matter what side of the fence you land on, you come to the end result. That these insects leave you with nothing. Now, I am going to say something to the effect of the different stages of locust. And I don't know if that's necessarily where I land. But I think it's interesting and I think it's worth saying. Okay, the terms here with locusts may be synonymous, though again, some have thought that it's referring to different species or reflected to different stages in a locust's physical development. Okay, so now since locust invasions are foreign to us, at least to this degree, allow me to help us capture the devastation in our text by taking us back to 1915, okay? So we're going to play a little Back to the Future, okay? You're Marty, I'm the Doc, okay? Or if you want to be the Doc and I'll be Marty, whatever, okay? We just need to find a car in the right circumstances, okay? So 1915, there was a plague that covered Palestine and Syria from the border of Egypt to the Taurus Mountains. Okay, so this is a broad range. The first swarms appeared in March. These were adult locusts that came from the northeast and moved toward the southwest in clouds so thick they obscured the sun. Can you imagine that? Like, it would be getting darker just because of this swarm. The females were about 3 inches in length. So these are pretty big, okay? These are the locusts that the progressive Dems are going to want you to eat instead of steaks, okay? Yeah, it sounds fascinating. Crunchy. They immediately began to lay eggs by digging holes in the soil about 4 inches deep and depositing about 100 eggs in each hole. It says these holes were everywhere. Witnesses estimated that as many as 65,000 to 75,000 eggs were concentrated in a single square meter of soil, and patches like this covered the entire land from north to south. Then, after eating and laying their eggs, these locusts flew away. Then, within a few weeks, the young locusts hatched. These resembled large ants. They had no wings, and within a few days they began moving forward by hopping around on the ground like fleas. They would cover 400 to 600 feet a day, devouring any vegetation that was left. Then by end of May, they had molted. In this stage, they had wings, but they could not fly. Instead, they moved forward by walking and jumping, and they were bright yellow. Finally, the locusts molted again, this time becoming the fully developed adults that had invaded the land originally. According to a description of this plague in the December issue of 1915 National Geographic magazine, the earlier stages of these insects attacked the vineyards. He says, once entering a vineyard, the sprawling vines would in the shortest time be nothing but bare bark. When the daintier morsels were gone, the bark was even eaten by the young topmost branches, which, after exposure to the sun, were bleached snow white. Then, seemingly out of malice, they would gnaw off small limbs, perhaps to get to its pith within. He then describes how the locusts of the last stage completed destruction that had been begun by earlier forms. They attached the olive trees whose tough, bitter leaves had been passed over by the creeping locust. They stripped every leaf, berry, and even tender bark. They ate away layer after layer of the cactus plants, giving the leaves the effect of having been jackplaned. Even on the scarce and prized palms, they had no pity, gnawing off the tender ends of the sword-like branches and diving deep into the heart, they tunneled after the juicy pith. Man, this description of the locust plague is precisely what Joel and his contemporaries experienced in their day. Again, you have to have the picture of going outside and not seeing any green thing. All the leaves gone. And again, that's we can have a slight understanding of that with this drought we've been going in. It's amazing that a lot of trees, their leaves are just withering away, falling down to the ground, because they don't have the water to keep them nourished. We've talked about this cedar tree or whatever evergreen tree we have right out here. You can look at it just withering away. And I'm going to try to refrain myself, so I'm going to be nice. But anyway, so this is the place in which they find themselves. One more thing I want to read from the article. He says, we marvel how this ancient writer, so he's talking about Joel. So think about this. In 1915, National Geographic, he's writing about this event, but he's also pulling from the book of Joel, where we are tonight. He says, we marvel how this ancient writer, Joel, could have given so graphic and true a description of a devastation caused by locusts in so condensed form. Now, notice this repetitive pattern. What such and such left has now been eaten by this. This left this, and then they came and cleaned it off. Right? This depicts, again, the wave after wave destructive locusts, each of which left smaller and smaller amounts of vegetation for the next, until, in the end, everything was devoured. Yes?
My picture that I'm getting is winter in the middle of summer. I
Yeah.
think there's just nothing but branches and everything else is gone in the middle of summer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you think, okay, then where's the harvest? And then, I mean, we've note around here about the corn and how awful it's been.
What's worse is next year.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not just right now while everything looks bad and stuff, but then down the road. Well, so I'll talk to you about the ewe we lost. Because of the condition of our grass, because of the lack of rain, it increased the spread of worms. And so this one died of worms. We couldn't treat it fast enough. And normally we always treat our sheep in the spring and in the fall. And that's always been enough. But just because of how bare the ground is, that wasn't enough this year for especially this one. But yeah, so we lost this one, and then the ripple effect of, well, so then we're not going to get a lamb from her this fall. And then it's like, okay, well then there's a meal that's gone, right? And it just bleeds over. And then you're thinking, and then you're going through that, and you're experiencing that death firsthand and again, we're not, talking about my family, we're not solely dependent upon our livestock.
There's a lot of people that are.
But exactly, that's these people in our text. They're completely dependent. What we eat for supper comes out of our garden, our farm, or whatever the case, and then our livestock. And so you have to put yourself, and it's hard to do because we live in America in 2022 with all the modern advances and life of leisure. Well, I don't know what I'm going to do for supper. I'll just swing by Dillon's and pick something up. That's completely foreign to them. They're thinking, how are we going to live? And then Joel, though, he has to put it in right perspective. Because there's always going to be people that put it in wrong perspective. This is God's judgment. It's a foreshadowing of the day of the Lord that we briefly talked about last time. We'll get into it more next time. But Joel's making sure, hey, this is from God. This is God's judgment upon you. This is His hand upon you. It's coming down. And there's a purpose, and we'll get into that. But other people will say, oh, no, it's not God. And that's what we see from other prophets during the time of the northern invasion and the southern invasion. The prophets would be like, oh, no, we're going to have prosperity. No, God's not going to bring a sword. And of course, God tells Isaiah and the other prophets, I did not send them. Right? They're not truly God's prophets. These people that are just saying, you don't have to worry about it. Things are going to get better. Joel is a true prophet of the Lord, and he's speaking whatever the Lord wants him to speak, if it's bad news or good news. And here it's bad news, but there is good news to come. And that is the result. And I don't want to, that's next week, so I really don't want to get ahead of myself there. I want to dig in a little more. Oh my, it's 5:30.
Pretty much buckle up.
Did Keith push fast forward from his house? Here we
It
go.
does give you hope.
Yeah.
You're not going to your children and your children's children, so you will survive.
Yes.
I mean, it's not.
Yeah. And so let's quickly look at who he. So first group he told was the elders. Now, in verse 5, let's pick up there. He says, awake, drunkards, and weep and wail, all you wine drinkers, on account of the sweet wine that is cut off from your mouth. For a nation has invaded my land, mighty and without number. Its teeth are like the teeth of a lion, and it has the fangs of a lioness. It has made my vine a waste, and my fig tree splinters. It has stripped them bare and cast them away. Their branches have become white. So here it's interesting that the second group Joel talks to and warns are the drunkards. These would be the people who would normally cared least about what's going on, right? They're in their house taking a nap. It's midday. They don't care what day it is, what month it is. But here, there's a sense that they're going to be aroused by what's going on because there's no more wine. And they would probably be in ones that would respond quickly because they want their wine. So secondly, now he talks to them. We continue on in verse 8.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
So it talks about invaded the land. Is it still talking about the locusts, or is it talking about Assyria and Babylon?
I'm going to say the locusts still. I see it as a typology of what's to come, Assyria and Babylon. And again, there's so much. It's almost like we could spend one Bible study for every verse, and we wouldn't ever get out of Joel. And it's only 3 chapters. And so I'll lean on Jerry here in a moment. But there are those who go, okay, this is that. But it is clear as he talks about this locust, in my opinion, it has to be real vegetation or a real locust. There is going to be a shift. When does that come exactly? But we know in history, Assyria does come and Babylon does come. Jerry, do you want to feed off of anything he asked? If that's, I mean, I know you've done research on this too.
Well, I think this is a famine. This is a starvation, and I will just say this about starvation. Starvation always begins in any nation of the world with a famine. Grains and plants first, and then animals.
Yeah.
Okay? So we are blessed in our country that we have a balance. We eat millions and millions, metric tons of plants and grains. We also eat millions and millions of metric tons of what? Meat.
Yeah.
So we're blessed with our land-grant institutions, some 50 of them, the research involved, that we are blessed with plenty. All right? So, yeah, we might have a drought over here, maybe not over here, but see, we have food coming in from all different angles. Some nations aren't like that.
Yeah.
And we have a system of economics that still, I think, is dwindling away that provides an incentive for people that raise the food.
Yeah.
Collectivism, communism does not provide the incentive for people to grow food.
Yeah.
So people starve, like Russians. It always begins with the grains and plants and then progresses to the animals. Then when the grains are all gone and the animals are gone, what's left? Like my friend that I went to school with, Andrew, they ate tree bark. He's from China. They ate barks off trees.
Oh my. Yeah.
There's a progression of starvation. Plants and then animals.
I know some have eaten the locusts.
Oh, yeah.
But I think this is a real.
Yeah. But I have heard others that take it differently. But the blood, I mean, it's to some capacity, this has to be real. And because it's a forewarning of this greater judgment to come, this day of the Lord. But that's a great question. So let me now pick up in verse 8. Well, like a virgin girded with sackcloth, for the bridegroom of her youth, the grain offering and the drink offering are cut off. From the house of the Lord, the priests mourn, the ministers of the Lord, the field is ruined, the land mourns, for the grain is ruined, the new wine dries up, fresh oil fails. Be ashamed, O farmers, well, O vine dressers, for the wheat and the barley, because the harvest of the field is destroyed, the vine dries up, and the fig tree fails. The pomegranate and the palm also, and the apple tree, all the trees of the field dry up. Indeed, rejoicing dries up from the sons of men. Let me back up. Back to your question. I do want to say this. We have the luxury of reading it in 2022 and looking back and going, okay, what's the big picture of what Joel's saying here? And again, we can look back and go, okay, well, he's forewarning them. He's telling them, okay, judgment is coming, the great day of the Lord. And again, that's the major theme of this book. It's repetitive. We have yet to get there just because we're taking our time. I say taking our time, but that's relative. But anyway, so we know, yes, the Lord used Assyria, used Babylon to bring judgment, to discipline his people, to cause a remnant to be faithful to him, and so that's the purpose. So anyway, so here now, what we just read, 8 through 12, here's another category of people Joel is talking to. The farmers. It's about the land. The land is mourning. But all these effects here, farmers firsthand. Again, everything being destroyed, it's going to have a deep, intimate impact with every individual. Fathers, mothers, children. But here, feeding off of what Jerry just said, talking about those who grow food, though they experience it first. Farmers will know before we do what, the amount of wheat for bread there's going to be. Corn, right? The farmers that grow corn around here, that mostly goes into livestock feed. Well, if they know they didn't produce that much corn because of a drought or whatever the case may be, well, they know the ripple effects it's going to have long before you go buy, even dog food, which has a lot of grains in it, right? So again, here's a group of people, you're experiencing this firsthand, and awaken up. Again, I don't want to get into what Joel's going to say, but it just comes naturally with it. And again, it's just wake up, repent. And so this is the third group. So he's talked to the elders, the leaders, the drunkards, who you least expect, the farmers, and now fourth in verse 13, gird yourselves with sackcloth and lament, O priests. Well, O ministers of the altar, come spend the night in sackcloth, O ministers of my God, for the grain offering and the drink offering are withheld from the house of your God. So this fourth group are the religious leaders. Now, there's a sense in which they're going to be the last ones to be affected. They won't be affected until the people can't pay the temple tax. Further, they're going to be affected once the offerings come in that they sacrifice to the Lord, and in part their families get to eat from. So there's a sense where these priests, religious leaders, they can be asleep to what's going on in the land, the immorality, spiritual adultery, because it doesn't affect them and their houses directly. But because of the people and how they're living, forsaking the Lord, they're going to experience things, and there's going to be a ripple effect to the religious leaders. And then once it gets there, it's, you would hope if they're, in the end, they don't really even care at that. But they just whisper sweet sayings into the ears of the people. Oh, don't worry, don't worry.
Well, that sounds fun.
Yeah, right. And that's where we're at in our land. We don't have the destruction on a large capacity, and And I don't know, just because of the size of our country, like Jerry said, we pull in resources from everywhere. It's kind of circular and everything else. California can have a drought for years, but, Indiana and other places can have just luscious crops. So anyway, it's going to be hard to see the effects and how, in the midst of where we live and stuff. But again, there's a sense that experiencing God's judgment as a people, and I truly believe we're at the beginning stages in America. Some people might say further along. That's fine. But I do think God's hand of judgment is upon us. And that's rightfully so. One, because the mass of the people have forsaken the Lord. There's just a very little care for spiritual things. And they're saying the Lord has the best plan for your life right now, kind of stuff. Yes, go ahead.
You and Carl probably know better than the rest of us sitting here, but a big percentage of our food supply is perishable. I think it's milk.
Oh, yeah.
Eggs. These things have to be ongoing every day. And we are a precarious situation even in a land of plenty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We vulnerable.
Yeah.
We're vulnerable. So don't think that it can't happen here.
Yeah. Well, and we saw.
We keep falling away from the Lord, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and we saw, 2 years ago or so, COVID, right? And how quick those grocery shelves vanished.
that's right.
And part of the judgment we see, I think, is a lot of churches shutting down, though I think some of that is for the better. But that's slow effects. Further, let me come back to you here in a minute, Bill. Further, I'll say, and how can God not judge a land? And I'll feed off of Lee on this, that has committed abomination of so many abortions. And Carl and I, this is on a positive note, Carl and I went to a small abolition luncheon, a meeting last Friday, and we're going to have for the first, I think this is for the first time, a total abolition bill, a total ban, not to regulate regarding life or heartbeat, this or that, but to have something like Oklahoma. And it seems like, just on a quick note, this is a rabbit trail, and I agreed with what a pastor said there, that we are just behind Oklahoma about a decade or so in everything they implemented. So, but with Oklahoma and all of their laws against abortion right now, like Brett said, that was fueled by these abolitionists. It was not fueled by the pro-life movement. I think that needs to be said, to be fair. So anyway, yes, we find ourselves in a place of judgment. Yes.
One of the things that I think you discussed it a little bit with it, and I looked it up. You can look up survival of the Dust Bowl on PBS stations.
Yeah.
And really see what it's like. But it's kind of like, I don't know how exactly to describe it, except when you shut a cruise ship off, it'll go for 30 miles before it even slows down.
Yeah.
Well, like Jerry said, when all of the crops are gone and all of the trees and all the animals are dead, then you can't go to the refrigerator and get a sandwich. You have to start inch by inch, day by day. It's going to take you a season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons to get caught back up to where you were back over here. So meanwhile, like you said, the people, what are they going to eat? How are they going to survive until that point where it's available again? And that doesn't come up. People don't think about that.
Yeah, and when those times come, when the cupboards are bare and and the shelves are bare, when it's out of the hands of God's judgment, that is in His loving provision of He's trying to waken us up, because we hopefully food it wakes us up. It's like, oh well, I need this. I better change my life or whatever before the sword comes and they're slain. So again, it is God's mercy on display here of he could have just sent Assyria in Babylon with no forewarning. But that's not what he did.
People pray in times of dire need.
Yes. Well, you think about fasting. What does fasting do? It deprives the body and it causes you to press more into Christ. I'll tell you what, if you've never fasted, you've never known a time in which you will pray more to the Lord. Lord, help me make it another minute at some point junctures. And so that fasting is a tremendous means of grace, which we rarely use. And as we're talking about Joel here, and I'm at my conclusion soon, I want to say this, because what we see historically is something that I was just contemplating today, is backsliding, and what causes that. And found it profoundly true that people who backslide typically, I have some issues going on with my eye tonight. Typically, it's because they neglect the public and private means of grace. Meaning, they don't go to corporate worship, and then they do not open up their Bible at home, pray at home, meditate at home, right? And some people, they can neglect the private means of grace and still put on a show publicly, but in the end, that's going to wither too, because they don't have the right heart behind it. But God has granted us the immense blessing of direct access through the Son. You can pray to your Heavenly Father any minute of the day. You do not need to call your pastor up. Hey, Kyle, I know it's midnight, but I'm feeling discouraged. I don't have, whatever the case may be, can you please pray, intercede between me and the Lord? No, you have a mediator, and it's Jesus Christ, and you have that ability whenever you want. Further, we have the gift of His Word. We can crack open the Word anytime. And with our technology, you could put on a sermon. You could a Christian radio. There's so many things, so many blessings. But again, if we neglect those, you're going to see a withering. It's just like if you don't eat healthy, that's slowly going to have ramifications upon your body. Sometimes, in health-wise, it's not a withering, it's a enlarging, right? And it's just a true deal. And, I'm meddling? Well, I'm talking about my own life right now, too. So,
Cookies.
cookies. Yeah, that's...
So you start fasting, they start making cookies.
Yeah. All right, let me conclude here. I'll open it up for questions and stuff and comments. We kind of went off, but that's typical, so that's fine. We're going to push pause here tonight, guys. Don't forget, Joel has been commissioned with this responsibility to share this divine message, and it's not only a responsibility, it's a privilege. We looked at that last time. It's a message of warning in light of what has just happened, the condition that they currently find themselves in, and then what is right around the corner. These are people experiencing God's judgment and has decimated, utterly destroyed all plant life. These are people who are experiencing this hardship of life, and it's upon this event that Joel will build his message to them, and that's where we will pick up next week. Yeah, let me push pause there, guys.